Alright guys, if you're coming here, you've probably watched every single G9 Mark II video on the internet at this point. Welcome to the channel. I don't have one, but I just wanted to talk about 5 things that the GH6 might do better than the G9 II. So let's get into it. Now, obviously the G9 II has all the fanciest new firmware updates, especially the new phase detect autofocus, some really great in-body stabilization, the best probably in the world at this point, and a bunch of new things that we'll talk about maybe a little bit in this video or in a separate video. But I really just wanted to talk about those 5 things that I think the GH6 does better than the G9 II, and also just talk about how the GH6 is still a very competent camera, and unless that autofocus is the one thing holding you back, you might not necessarily need the G9 II, at least not quite yet. So let's get into it. So number 1 is the overheating. You guys have the same information I do, and that is that there is no fan. The photographers ruined it for us, and they said we don't want a fan, even though it doesn't compromise the camera in any possible way. But, you know, still, I don't want to lie to you guys and say the camera is bad with heat. It still is going to record a long time, and in my experience, even 4K 120 is going to go for a good amount of time. But the GH6, on the other hand, or even the S5 Mark II, are going to be better in the heat, and they aren't going to overheat ever, pretty much. So yeah, that's one thing the GH6 does better than the G9. Number 2 is the body design. Now, I really do love the S5 Mark II, and that's pretty much what the G9's body is based off of. But in my opinion, the GH6 has a few things that I really do appreciate. I like the size, even though it's a little big. I like the tilty and flippy screen for the more stripped down productions, and I really like being able to keep the camera centered in front of me. So that's a big thing for me. The G9 Mark II just doesn't have to keep the size down. And other little things like the record button or the front button record button, I use those all the time on gimbals or on shoulder rigs. So yeah, the body design, I think there's benefits obviously to the G9 Mark II, but the GH6 still has a few things like the red record light and things that I do prefer. The other thing is the 2 SD cards, you know. We've got a CF Express card in the GH6 and just 2 SD cards, which I know some people will prefer on the G9 Mark II, but I really do and have found that the internal ProRes is definitely a nice option to have. You're going to be able to do some internal ProRes like in HD and things like that, but no 4K internal ProRes. I think ProRes is great for short clips. I think it's also great for testing the camera. I use it a lot for my YouTube videos to get the best quality internally, so that's one thing you're not going to get as well. Another big thing with the GH6 is you can do Blackmagic RAW and ProRes RAW over HDMI with all the firmware updates and things like that. Now, most of these cameras do get that functionality eventually, and I'm sure the G9 II is going to get at least one of them, if not both. Most cameras these days are getting the option to do HDMI VRAW or ProRes RAW, but at release at least, this camera is going to be unsupported, and I haven't heard anything about timelines and when ProRes or Blackmagic RAW might come to the camera just yet, although it was literally just announced, so I'm sure we'll get that information soon, but it might be a while. And the last thing is just going to be price and availability. This is going to be a really popular camera. It's going to be pretty hard to get unless you pre-order it or get it from a local shop. And while the GH6 did launch at $2,000, $2,200 in the United States, G9 Mark II is going to be about $1,899, $1,900 pretty much. And at the end of the day, you're going to be able to find discounts on the GH6 from $1,600 to $1,300, so $200, $300, $600 cheaper, which is no joke. So if you really don't need that autofocus, if everything else works for you, then the GH6 is going to be a great option still into the future. So plus a lot of you already have it, and so getting a new camera, selling the old camera, you're usually going to be at a loss on that, even if you do sell the GH6 to buy the G9 II. So at the end of the day, the camera you already have is the best camera for you, and as long as you're getting the most out of that camera, you might not need to upgrade. So I just want to make this video to say GH6, GH5 Mark II, all those cameras are still amazing and do amazing work. And while obviously the G9 Mark II has all the fanciest new autofocus and, you know, live view composite and a couple things like the, you know, burst rates, I don't think you necessarily need to buy it. So just consider what you want in a camera, what's important to you, and hopefully that drives your decision rather than just like it's the newest thing coming out. Although obviously there are some really super helpful features in that new camera, I'm not gonna lie, but those are just 5 things I thought the GH6 did a little bit better than the G9 II. And listen guys, I know it's disappointing to miss out on the latest and greatest thing, or to feel like you put a lot into a camera just for it to be replaced by another camera that has all the same features but is just a little bit better. And at the end of the day, change is inevitable, even though change is never easy. And technology moves forward day by day with camera companies in the world. And when it comes to Micro Four Thirds, when it comes to Panasonic, one of the cameras had to be the last camera with depth from defocus, contrast-based autofocus. And if you bought the GH6, it's unfortunate that their super flagship camera had to be the last one. It's a shame that the camera that you bought and that I bought was the one that was the last with contrast. But, you know, at the same time, it's been a few years, technology goes forward, and if there's one thing you can count on never changing, it's the fact that everything's always changing. So just use your camera to the best of your ability, get the most out of it, and when the time comes, when a sale goes on, when the price drops, or when the GH7 comes out and the G9 II price drops, then maybe that'll be your time to jump. But you really shouldn't feel bad about your purchases and buying the camera that was right for you at the time. Just be happy that this technology is going forward and that Panasonic and Micro Four Thirds is still alive and well thanks to the work Panasonic's been doing. Alright guys, see you next time. Enjoy this scenic 5.7K GH6 waterfall.